Hello and welcome to the first episode of our interview series Mic'd Up with Mars, where we will unlock mobile user acquisition and the world of AdTech. My name is Deeksha Sahani. I'm a senior content marketing manager at Affle, and in today's interview, we are joined by Ankit Rawal, Director of Business Development and Partnership at Affle, and Viraj Sinh, co-founder and managing partner international at Affle, who unravel the year that went by and what's coming for mobile advertising in 2021. So welcome Ankit and Viraj. We are very glad that you could join us today, and we hope that you're all mic'd up. Let's get rolling.
Absolutely, looking forward to it.
Same here, Diksha. Looking forward. Thanks for having us.
Great. So let's begin with the first question. 2020 was indeed a very different year. How would you summarize it for mobile ad tech?
I know it was an interesting year for mobile ad tech, largely because of the change from Apple's announcement on IDFA. While we all know that they postponed it to beginning of this year, it really created an upheaval among all the major players within the mobile ecosystem. As we know, right, the jury is still out on how will this play out. It was definitely one of the big themes that dominated the industry. I think the second one, of course, is the pandemic and the effect of it on the app economy. Incidentally, I touched upon this some time back, where how industries transformed from high-tech to high-tech, accelerating the digitization for many businesses and creating new opportunities for the mobile economy across the globe.
Great. What about you, Viraj? What do you think?
Yeah, no, every industry goes through a cycle of change every few years. And this year completely disrupted the mobile ecosystem again. Like Ankit mentioned, the impact of Apple's announcement is definitely something that will be felt this year. But also what is interesting for me is to see how the pandemic gave birth to new verticals within the app ecosystem. At the beginning of the year, there were bigger brands who were spending actively and had to question their business models and spends once the pandemic hit. Within a few months, we identified new app verticals and opportunities, specifically in the EFGH category: education, food tech, fintech, gaming, and health tech. These verticals have come back so much stronger post-COVID that mobile ad tech as a whole has witnessed an uplift towards the second half of the year. The effect of this was also seen through a number of companies in the mobile ad tech space in the ecosystem doing an IPO or raising funding as well.
So really great insights. Moving on, in your opinion, what would be the defining trends for mobile advertising in 2021? Let's start with you, Ankit.
Actually, if I think of it, it would be creative and creative thinking. So if you see, right, till now, because of the available data around microsegments, CTRs, CVRs, creativity was really relegated to really poor quality, high iterative creatives. However, now because of this limited tracking, which will happen because of deprecation of IDFA in iOS 14 early this year, UA managers would really have to invest more in creative strategy and quality of creative products. So think of it like traditional creative thinking like user research, motivation and behavioral analytics as on why certain personas click on certain ads will become really, really interesting. Mobile acquisition teams, in fact, will become more holistic, hiring more right side brains, if I can put it that way, than just data analytical skills, as was the case till now. I think the other interesting trend is how cross-platform mobile, web and app advertising will evolve. Mobile web advertising as a channel for acquisition will really become important. With Apple tax, and I'm sure we all of us saw that pan out in 2020, charging almost 30% on in-app purchases on some of the biggest players, whether it was Spotify or Netflix or Fortnite. Companies are really discovering other channels to acquire users, and mobile web is emerging as a favorable channel. And this already offers standard ad formats, cheaper CPMs. So I think the other interesting trend would be web plus app as a channel for mobile user acquisition.
Yeah, as the world slowly returns to normalcy, there were certain mobile habits which we formed in 2020, but we see them sort of sticking through in 2021 as well. With increased mobile consumption, there will be renewed opportunities for mobile advertising, and the ecosystem will further evolve. As we already saw that with the emergence of newer app categories, the mobile advertising game changed altogether. And I really expect, to see this momentum continue in 2021 with further investments in fintech, in health tech, edutech, not just in the emerging markets, but globally, as a lot of these verticals will emerge as mobile first, something which was very hard to visualize before 2020. But that being said, I do expect some of the bigger categories, traditionally those have been in the shopping verticals, entertainment, gaming, which already have huge bases, huge active daily use, DAUs and MUs. They'll look to penetrate in the tier 2, tier 3 markets, especially in the emerging markets like India, Southeast Asia, even Latam. Video formats and vernacular contents are likely to play a more central role, as Ankit mentioned, in all communication that comes out of a lot of these established brands and categories.
Okay, so now I'm thinking, given these changes, how would advertisers approach their advertising in 2021? I'll start with you, Ankit, first, and then Viraj, we'll take your thoughts.
As we see, right, as it played out in 2020, that with rising concern on user privacy and limited ability to target micro segments, brands really need to explore what I call contextual advertising. What it means is learning from the user personas and behavior from the context she is, and then accordingly present them a relevant recommendation and not use any personally identified information. So let me explain with an example. Right? So suppose when you're watching a live sport on TV or say even on an OTT platform, you really know that the persona is someone who's interested in sports. So brands which are relevant to that kind of an audience can show ads to them. Another interesting way to think of contextuality also means a basic understanding of the environment in which the user is using her phone. So imagine if you're in a lean forward mode, which typically is when you're like playing a game, you are really actively involved in the content, and versus a lean back mode is when you are much more relaxed, you are just browsing the phone on social media and OTT apps. Now in a lean back mode, you are still in a context to discover new products and services, and I can show you ads. Versus in a lean forward mode, I am so involved in the activity that any pop-up ad or any other form of ad is really construed as an irritant. So I think recognizing the contextuality of the user and using those signals to really do targeting are much better in a privacy first world and will become the de facto option in 2021 and beyond.
That's a really interesting observation. Over to you, Viraj.
Yeah, I really think this year is going to be a year of transition. As you already sort of touched upon, with Apple deprecating the IDFAs for user targeting and segmenting, the way now growth marketers, especially in the developed nations, developed countries where iOS has a much higher market share, manage their growth budgets and campaign growth budgets, the campaign execution is going to evolve drastically compared to how it's been done all this while. Tracking, attribution, campaign management are all open-ended questions with no clear answers yet. Growth marketers are not just going to be focused on spends, but also look at different channels and how this combine together and work together. From a tracking and attribution lens, incrementality, which we've sort of caught on in 2020, but in 2021 is going to be a big trend to follow as we go through the year.
Absolutely. So now moving on to a different theme. Unify is one big theme coming out a lot across both of you. Can you share a bit more about how at Affle you're looking to unify audiences to the dashboard?
So very interesting actually. So if you think of it, the AdTech in the last 10 to 12 years have really evolved in different phases. If you recall the first phase, which was say 2008 to 2011-12, it started with huge focus on massive download, because this was when the app stores have come out and there was a huge incentive for people to just download and do land grab. And later on, the Lumascape really became complex with the emergence of new players, whether it was ad networks or unique supply sources. And then there was an evolution where it became the demand side platforms, OpenRTB, SSP, so on and so forth. So all this obviously was good for the advertiser, and there's a need for additional reach. And then as we figured out in many emerging markets, Android OEM recommendation became the way to increase distribution, largely where Google Play was not the main app store but OEMs and telcos. What is happening now today is that a lot of companies are trying to really unify this, because for a new advertiser it becomes really complex that how do we really navigate this value chain which is so complicated and convoluted. So we here with Affle Mass are really trying to unify all the channels so that the clients don't have to navigate this maze again and reinvent the wheel. based on their campaign KPIs, we are trying to find the right mix for them and put them on the path of UA success. So for example, if you are early in your evolution, you don't have that many downloads, you focus on social and Apple search ads, versus if you've really evolved and you're only looking on pragmatic user acquisitions, you really want to mitigate as much ad fraud as possible, we run that only for them. And then obviously you mix and match in between depending on your KPIs and so on and so forth. And the corollary to this had been that because there are so many different partners, you have so many different dashboards. And today a UA manager may be just juggling between 15 to 20 dashboards if you're working with that many partners. So again, we are trying to unify all these dashboards and partners and make it very relevant, which is business outcome rather than KPIs and metrics on their dashboard. We are trying to resolve that by having one unified dashboard that gives an advertiser transparent and deeper insights.
Viraj, what would you like to add to this?
At Affle and specifically on the MAS platform, what we are really trying to sort of drive is to empower our advertisers with greater transparency on where their ad budgets are being spent, how their ads are being served, and how each channel is working towards delivering whatever their objectives that they've sort of set out. One single dashboard empowers the advertisers to measure each and every channel down to the KPIs and the business goals that they really want to track. Even though the buying currency across each of the channels could be different, and how it really impacts the KPIs is where the advertisers will really have visibility on the one single dashboard. Also, whether you're looking at creative impact and which creative works on which channel better at, say, an install level or even at a post-install level, these transparent insights is what the MAS platform will try to give the advertisers the ability to make quicker decisions and help them drive their marketing budgets or advertising budgets.
Absolutely. So we're looking at the advertising of the future. Before we end this podcast, I think we really need to address the elephant in the room, which is that the privacy debate is back in focus with WhatsApp's new privacy policy. What sense can we make of privacy in 2021, and how is this going to impact the app ecosystem? Ankit, what do you think?
The whole privacy discussion debate is already happening, whether it was happening in Europe through GDPR or say CCPA in US. And now what we are seeing is that country-specific regulations are coming. Like even here in India, we've been talking about Regulation Act, which will come in being in 2021. So what will this really do is that it will really what I call vocal for local. What it means is that, like for example, for app distribution, there'll be local players which are coming up. We've already seen this here, say in India or the geographies through OEM app stores. Or what we saw play out with short format video in India, post ban of TikTok, we saw some of the Indian players, whether it was Josh or Takatak from MX Player came out, or even in US, for example, there was Triller or Yubo. So what we're really seeing is that as privacy becomes important, regulations becoming very, very stringent, many local companies, local players are coming up in the consumer internet, and they are really competing with head-on with the big tech. So likes of the Silicon Valley players or even players from China are getting competed with the local players. And this theme of vocal for local will really play out in this privacy-first world.
Viraj, what do you think?
Even before the IDFA announcement by Apple last year, the ball on the data privacy was already set rolling with the implementation of GDPR in Europe a couple of years back and CCPA in the US. There are already conversations even in India around drafting its own regulatory policy, even as more active conversations on privacy pick up around the world. As more policies are drafted and driven in each geography, what becomes personally identifiable information will change, and so will how advertisers use that data will really define how 2021 pans out with regards to privacy.
So vocal for local, and then just seeing about how each of the countries tackle these conversations around privacy are going to be main themes. Well, on that note, let's wrap up our podcast, and thank you, Ankit and Viraj, for joining us today.
Loved it. Thank you for having us, Diksha. It was a great conversation.
Same here. Looking forward for more such episodes going forward.
Great. Thank you. And for our listeners, we hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Stay tuned for our next episode on Mic'd Up with MAS.